So welcome to the Media Strategy Fresh Tactics for Finding and Reaching Your Audience session. My name is Colette Lerner. I'm the VP of Digital Acquisition at Guthy-Renker. Guthy-Renker is the world's largest privately held direct response company. We own Proactive, When by Chaz Dean, Meaningful Beauty, Surecover, and a host of other brands. And I'm super excited today to be on this panel with these folks. We're here to talk about media strategy and how very divergent brands, from a soup company to a credit card company to some tech platforms, have been targeting consumers with segments well beyond programmatic display. So we've been having conversations here at AdTech for a few years now about programmatic media and the use of big data to target our display and sometimes well beyond it. But really what's interesting about the work that these brands are doing and what these guys are going to present today is how brands are using it well beyond that space. And they're using data to target their campaigns from soup to nuts. Sorry to use that analogy. And to really be focused on what the consumer wants and what their journey is, and to be less about what the media tactic is and more about the message. And so I'm going to get off the stage real quick and give you these guys. And just a quick introduction. Campbell's is up first, and Campbell's is a 144-year-old brand who are presenting with IRI about the ways in which they use first and third-party data to develop cross-platform attribution models around an extremely complex path to purchase that involves online and offline advertising, online content discovery and consumption, and ultimately coordinates with consumer purchasing in a brick and mortar that's not connected to the brand. After that, we have Visa discussing their recent NFL ad campaign, which I'm sure many of you saw, and how they were using it to drive consumers from viewing television to social engagement, leveraging their customer segment data to deliver the right message at the right moment in time to the right consumer, regardless of platform and media. And then finally, we have the CMO Council in Ballyhoo presenting research on how brands are leveraging local marketing to ensure that their national message and campaigns via mobile, digital, social, and even traditional channels can be better managed and automated in order to activate customers. So it's a lot of content. It's going to be pretty divergent, and then we're going to follow it up with some Q&A. Hopefully you guys won't be shy, and we'll have a bunch of questions because the content's pretty amazing. And then we'll have a great conversation. So with that, I will toss it over to Campbell's and IRI.
Even seats in the front.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Is the one?
Yeah.
All right. Let's do it this way. Hi, I'm Joy Joseph from Symphony IRI, and I'm here with Michael, associate from Campbell Soup Company, and we're going to be talking about cross-platform advertising strategies and how we've worked with Campbell's on this pilot project, leveraging a new and innovative approach to cross-platform execution. Can you guys hear me okay? All right, cool. Louder? All right. Okay, let's see. Big guy, small voice, yeah. So we're going to be talking about cross-platform, and I got to see if I can manage juggling between the mic and the down button. All right. So one of the key issues with cross-platform execution or advertising execution in general as it stands today is that we make really very simplistic assumptions in general about the consumer's path to purchase, which is a critical component of cross-platform. Cross-platform cuts across multiple platforms of advertising. And one of the key elements in there is how does it impact the consumer's decision process through path to purchase? The problem is we make really oversimplistic assumptions about the path to purchase. It's considered very monolithic without too many layers of interaction in them. And so, for example, a straightforward assumption of path to purchase is that consumers start with a needs recognition. So you perceive a need state, and you act upon it by looking at information channels to research, so search how you would fulfill those need states. And then once you have information aggregated, then you would act upon it by trial, and then consumption, and then repeat purchase. Those are kind of very straightforward logic of how consumers are propelled along the path to purchase. Problem is that today we have a very different path to purchase. It's not monolithic at all. It has multi-tiered layers in there of interaction. So consumers, and so we have our ubiquitous consumer funnel there, and this is our take on the consumer funnel, except that earlier we would just assume that you work towards getting awareness. That's what advertising gets you, and then your ultimate goal is conversion and purchase intent. Problem is, that's not how it works today. You have, things don't end with purchase and trial. There's a feedback loop, right? So you have a need state recognition, awareness, you leverage mass media to drive those offline ads to drive the need state awareness. And then next, as you build familiarity and consideration, there are other media elements that come into play, lower funnel tactics, search and online advertising that kind of enhances or reinforces the purchase decision. You have purchase, and now consumers can give their opinion, right? 10 years back, that wasn't the case. Even 5 years back, there's not as much of a feedback process. We have social media today where consumers can actually talk about their brand experience. So you did your trial, brand experience, advocacy. If the brand experience was not positive, there would be negative feedback. So there's this whole intricacy around the path to purchase that is kind of being oversimplified when we create advertising strategies, unfortunately. Where cross-platform comes in is creating that understanding that all of these media tactics interact along the purchase funnel, and how they interact, how does offline advertising increase the probability that consumers will react to your online advertising? How do you control the interaction using online social media interaction, brand advocates through social media? So within that context, within that cross-platform context, you have marketing life cycle, starting with identifying the need states, working with once you determine what's the need state that you're going to go after with your product, then you determine a messaging strategy. So you cannot have good advertising without the right messaging strategy. The messaging strategy needs to take into consideration nuances of differences in consumption across platforms. The messaging strategy cannot be uniform. There are different contexts around consumption of TV advertising versus online advertising. Your advertising strategy or messaging strategy needs to take that into account. Then after that, once you create your platform messaging strategy, you have a platform strategy of executing. And then you have execution excellence. So you need to kind of have an in-flight correction of getting feedback, learning from people that you're targeting and how they're responding to your messaging, and then in-flight correction, and then optimization. So measurement becomes a critical component. Now, measurement is the challenge because cross-platform means that people are being targeted across multiple platforms. You need to understand, first of all, you don't know the consumer that's responding to your TV advertising. Is it the same consumer that's responding to your online advertising? That the problem is identifying, are these the same consumers? Am I double counting people? And what is their interaction, right? So the way we have kind of addressed that in this approach that we've innovated over the past year or so is by taking our model of consumption. So we have, in this case, we are looking at an offline-online sales model. For CPG industry, it typically tends to be heavier on the left-hand side of the screen, right? So you have less online consumption, more offline. Media execution itself, even today, 60% of media for CPG companies is focused on TV, even for other industries as well. And then attribution currently, unfortunately, focuses more on the right-hand side, online activity, online conversion. In-store, there's a ton of things that's happening in-store that you're typically ignoring. So once you start kind of creating this framework of what's your overall multi-platform attribution and multi-channel consumption, then you can bring all of these data sources together. Now, this is a critical piece. So as I was saying earlier, you don't know who's consuming offline media, online media, and what they're doing in-store. That identification is how we're trying to crack this nut. So we are working with household-level TV data using set-top box and return path data to kind of identify the households that are viewing TV advertising. We are bringing in digital data through our panel, so we have a consumption panel, so we can track what consumers are using tags. We're able to identify what they are viewing in terms of online activity, what they're doing online, and then through the consumption panel, we know what they're doing in-store. So based on that, we are creating a propensity model, an econometric model that allows us to tell us what's the combination of tactics that will increase the propensity of consumption. So once we identify what's the interplay between a consumer that sees a TV ad, then sees the online ad, what's the lag effect? So what should be a typical lag between the TV and online? And what's the order? Should online go before TV? And then how do you follow up with promotions? So there's beyond media, there's a ton of money that's being spent on promotional activity or your sales promotion activity. How can you get cadence with that? Is there synergies that can be gained from timing of those events? And all of that is what we're uncovering with the propensity model. And so the propensity model essentially then gives what we're looking at on the lower right, which indices that tells us that these for certain segments, so in this case, we're creating consumer segments, a really simple segmentation scheme for this example, heavy, medium, and light consumers. What are the indices, propensity for marketing for heavies versus mediums versus lights, and how you can leverage them, and what is the interaction? So what we haven't shown here is that there's an interplay. So while an index for a heavy on TV advertising might be low, or for light it might be low, in combination with online, there's an additional synergy gain that you can create by combining those two. So at this point, I'll hand it over to John, who's going to talk about the case study we used for this for Campbell Soup.
Thanks, Joy. Lower this a bit. Hi, everyone. So the goal over the next, hopefully only a few minutes, just to give you the business case for why the work that Joy is doing with us is so important. I think Colette mentioned it initially. We're a 144-year-old company. We've been around, a very long time. My bet is if I talk to a significant portion of you out there, you're going to have some probably story from your childhood about your mom served you tomato soup with the grilled cheese, or it was cold outside, you had chicken noodle when you came in, it warmed you up. So you're all, I think, pretty familiar with what the Campbell brand, at least you have an idea about what it stands for. Probably around 2010 or 2011, we saw our performance start to lag a bit. And what we realized is that as our consumers were talking to us and telling us those stories, they all ended in childhood. There was no real recent story about how, I had this great experience with a Campbell product that I had yesterday, or I had this great new product that you guys came out with that really delighted my family. So that was kind of the key thing that we understood, and we set out to change that and make Campbell's much more relevant to consumers today, and not just from a nostalgic standpoint. So what ended up happening was we had a leadership change around 2011. We had a new CEO came in, and the focus, which is great from, I work in consumer insights, it's great to hear that we're putting the consumer first, and the consumer is at the center of everything that we're doing. So everything that we do moving forward is going to be based in consumer learning and consumer understanding, and that's what led us to understand that if we are going to continue to grow, and if you look at companies that are growing, they're focused in a few key areas, and if you want to grow, you have to be playing in those key areas. So what we tried to do is our big focus moving forward is on the millennial cohort and as well as Hispanics. Those are the two ones that we've really focused on. But again, consumer understanding is really at the heart of what we'll be doing. So before you can target the consumer, you have to understand who your consumers are. So I think like any good consumer packaged goods company, you're going to have a segmentation. You're going to understand the different types of consumers that are out there. And it's not just knowing who they are or what their demographics are, how many kids they have, what their income is, but it's understanding what their need states are. What are the things that they're looking for in a product experience? So it's key to understand that up front. And only after you have that understanding can you then go down the path of creating products that are going to appeal to those need states and to those consumers. The next thing that's going to happen is you're going to develop a messaging strategy that follows that. And again, we're an old company. We've done things, we've traditionally done things a certain way, but we're really trying to kind of break through, become a lot more current. If you're going to target a new consumer, you have to understand what types of media they consume, where they are, and you have to be there. That's the only way that your message is going to resonate. And key to that is this cross-platform dynamic that Joy had mentioned before, and really an attribution and a quantification and a measurement of what it's doing for you. Because I've started to learn this is that especially at Campbell's, we're very good at understanding the impacts of things that are less and less important. So your traditional mass media vehicles, we're not as good at understanding the online piece, the social piece, and the work with Joy, we feel is really going to help us start to understand that a lot better. And so these are some things that are just out in market that you may have seen already. I think these are very good examples of how that strategy has shifted, and our focus is, it's starting to be put into execution, which is always very important. The main point here is just, and I think Joy mentioned it earlier, is just all of these media vehicles interact with each other, and the key is driving engagement with the consumer, because you can show them a display ad, you can show them a TV commercial, but it's really important, if they're just seeing it, not engaging with it, it's money not so well spent. So you want to make sure that everything you're doing is creating engagement with the consumer. So our next steps, we've already started. We've gone down the path of data collection and understanding, what types of things we're going to need in order to bring this vision into reality. The four things that are there are, or the bubbles on the outside. Those are the key things that we see being able to leverage from this work that Joy has done. Understanding what combination of media vehicles will drive someone to try the product for the first time versus making them go back and buy it a second time. The synergy between in-store and media, that's a huge component for any CPG company, because everything's happening in the store. We don't have there's no direct to the consumer sales that we do. So it's really understanding how media gets them to the store, whether media is what is actually making them purchase in the store, or whether it's the discount they see when they hit the shelf. And again, at the bottom, the segmentation, understanding who you're talking to, understanding who's buying it. Is it the person you expected to buy it? It's the person you targeted? Is it someone else? All that learning will help us to optimize as we go forward. So that's it.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Alex Craddock. I'm head of marketing for North America for Visa Inc. And what I'd like to just spend 10 minutes sharing with you is basically our media reachable segmentation approach that we've been working on now for the last 2 years to really help us address the challenge of how do we reach the right segments in a media landscape that is incredibly fragmented and becoming very challenging for all marketers, but also in the context of a very different and evolving consumer decision journey that we're now all taking when we're making our consumer purchasing decisions. And, as Colette said, I'm going to use a reference to our NFL campaign that we ran to activate our last season sponsorship, just to sort of help bring it to life in terms of the changes that we made in our plan and some of the results that we ended up seeing from the result of the changes that this segmentation and the media reachable piece actually drove for us. So before I start, I always like to just ground everybody in what Visa is, because we often get referred to as Visa, the credit card company. And I think it's important to just sort of set everybody's sort of level that we aren't a credit card company. We're actually a global payments technology company. So we don't issue credit cards. That's not what we do. We're not a lender, so we don't loan people money. And we therefore aren't exposed to any of the consumer risk. What we are is a global payments technology company, and we basically have built this phenomenal global network that enables us to process transactions around the world and basically connect cardholders, merchants, and financial institutions. So I just want to make sure that we're all sort of in the right frame of mind and right place in terms of how we're thinking about Visa as I step into the presentation. So our story in terms of how we think about segmentation and how we think about making sure we're making our segmentation media reachable started here with a deep understanding of how the consumer has evolved. Now, I don't need to tell everybody in the room how digital and now social has fundamentally changed all our lives in terms of how we're interacting with each other, but also how we're interacting with brands and how that value exchange between brand and consumer and brands has changed dramatically. But the big sort of insight for us beyond that observation was the changes that we've seen in this space and how we're interacting with media has also significantly evolved our consumer decision journey. So in simple language, it's evolved from being a funnel where you used to just use a lot of broadcast media to tip a lot of people in the top of the funnel, and then through marketing tactics you would hope to convert them on the way down and spit out a sale at the end. that model has fundamentally changed to now what we call the consumer decision journey, which was actually something created by McKinsey, written about by David Edelman, in the Harvard Business Review in December 2010. And we were very inspired by his paper and his observation on how this new consumer decision journey had come about. And really, at a high level, what it means now is many of us enter into a consumer decision journey already having a consideration set. We've probably got 4 or 5 brands, 4 or 5 products that we're already thinking about purchasing because we've been informed already through our friends, through with the search we're doing online, through just engagement with various marketing and advertising activities. We then get to this space where we start to evaluate that consideration set that we entered into the consumer decision journey with. And that's an opportunity where, as marketers, salespeople particularly, can start to influence ultimately the decision that you're going to make when you get to that purchase space. So the evaluate stage is a really new stage that is influenced by friends, by social media, by that interaction in the sales room, and ultimately decides what you ultimately go and purchase. Then, and this was already alluded to by Joy, there's then this advocacy piece. So once you've made that purchase and you've made that purchase decision and got the product, you'll then talk about it. And you'll talk about it with your friends. You'll talk about it on social media. You'll go and review it on Amazon and start to extol, hopefully, its virtues. But equally, if you've not had a great experience, you're going to talk probably not so well about the product. But if you're talking well about the product, what that actually starts to do is to create, one, the loyalty loop for you, the buyer. You're going to feel much more connected to that brand and much more loyal to the company because obviously you're now an advocate for them. But also what that does is it starts to trigger a whole new set of consumer decision journeys for those consumers who have engaged with your comments, either one-on-one or your reviews that you're posting online or the comments that you're making on social media, and starting to make them consider that product as they enter into the consumer decision journey with their consideration set. So as we thought about that changing consumer decision journey, and we thought about now the myriad of places where you can engage consumers, we understood that we need to really develop a segmentation model that not only took this into account, but also ensured that we could reach people effectively across the different channels that exist. So what we developed, really sort of focusing on this central box, is a proprietary tool called Audience First. Now, Audience First works very much in concert with our brand strategy, which clearly articulates our global brand positioning and ensures that we are talking consistently about our brand. It also guides our product positioning as well in the context of our brand. And it also works in concert with our marketing strategy framework, which is effectively how we articulate and develop our marketing strategies in support of our key business and brand objectives. And Audience First is really a very disciplined approach, incredibly consumer-centric, so it puts the target audience at the very beginning of the process and ensures that we are really deeply interrogating that consumer and understanding the media they consume, how they consume it, and importantly, how they consume it on their journey through that consumer decision journey. And it's grounded in 3 core principles. 1, knowing your target audience, which is really the basis on which this is all founded, understanding their decision journey, and ultimately identifying where and how they are best influenced. So how we use this, and obviously in 10 minutes I'm keeping this very simple and high level, but how we use this really is by deeply interrogating a lot of data that we have that gets put into our Project After tool, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But what this enables us to do is at the consider, evaluate, decide, and advocate stage, we're able to understand what are the activities that the consumer is engaging in, what media are they engaging in, what type of content are they consuming in that moment in time, and whether or not that becomes an opportunity for us to potentially message to them to start to engage them in a conversation with ourselves and hopefully influence their behavior as they move through that consumer decision journey. So to do that effectively, we recognized that we needed to build our own tool, and we worked very much in collaboration with our agency partners to build what we've called Project After, which is our audience-first targeting engine and reporting tool. And what it allows us to do is effectively build media-reachable segmentation. So as we go through our strategy development, this is really our first port of call, to really understand what are the right segments to go after, and then importantly, how we should be reaching them. And what the After tool brings together is effectively 4 key sets of data from multiple sources. One is payment behavior, and that obviously is what our segmentation is deeply grounded in. So what we have is a payment panel, which again is a proprietary payment panel, which helps us understand effectively the spend behavior of the whole wallet. So not just how they're using Visa cards, but how they're using cash, check, and other competitive payment measures. We then have attitudes that we pull in from Simmons. We have a lot of traditional media data that we're pulling in from Nielsen and from MRI. And we have digital and social media that we're pulling in from Comscore. And through the combination analysis of all of that data, we are able to create 13 personas based on spend behavior. And then within those 13 personas, have a really rich understanding of the media that they engage with, the content that they engage with, and where in the decision journey we should be focusing our dollars from a marketing perspective. And this is an interactive tool that actually sits on the desktop, so every marketer, everybody within our agency has access to this tool and can refer to it at any time. What I have on the next slide is an illustrative view of the kind of data that we get out of the tool. So it doesn't actually look like this. This is like just produced this just for this slide. But you start to get a sense of the level of detail we get in terms of a particular segment, like modern affluent, which was the segment that we targeted for our NFL campaign. You get some demographic understanding. You start to get an understanding in terms of their household income. You start to dig very deeply into their spend behavior across their wallet. We also start to understand from a point of view of their media usage, what's the media usage that's rising to the surface? Where do they over-index in terms of particular media channels? When you're looking at digital and social media, what are the platforms or the sites that they're spending most of their time on? The other thing that's very interesting is even in the context of TV, we were actually able to identify new insights that we weren't aware of not just networks or cable channels that they're engaging with, but importantly programs and even those the times of day that a program is going on air and how that can be more powerful for us in terms of targeting our message. We were also able to identify secret weapons at a program level. So they may be on networks, for example, that we don't buy normally, but we've identified that a particular program could be very effective on TV. Likewise with digital, sites that rose to the top in terms of sites where modern affluent are spending a lot of time and they're spending meaningful time engaging with content, but also those sites that, although they may look like they fit well with the segment, they're actually not sites that are particularly meaningful when you put them into the context of the consumer decision journey. And then obviously from a social point of view, as that has exploded, we really need to get a much better understanding of what are the social platforms that resonate and what are people doing on social platforms. And again, we've got a really interesting set of data there that builds up this 30-day usage index where we can start to get a sense of which social platform is more important than others and where we should potentially be making choices and focusing our efforts. So after we've done all that analysis, we apply all of the data that we're able to get to truly understand what changes should we be making to our plan. How should we actually build our media plan to ensure that we're reaching the segment through the most effective media at the right time. Now what I've pulled out here is not all the changes that we made because it would never have fitted on one slide, but I've just focused on particularly the digital plan and just want to highlight some of the observations that we got from the project after tool and the changes that we then subsequently made to the plan. So what we identified for the modern affluent in the context of the NFL versus the general population is that they are using social media 73% more than the general population. So what that ultimately drove for us was an increase in our investment on the social media platforms 4 times than we had originally projected. We identified that they were using mobile devices 56% more than the general population, and in turn, we incorporated more mobile, whether that's smartphone or tablet, into our plan as well. We also identified that they were spending more time online, 5 hours more per week than the general population. So it became very evident that we needed to put more effort into the digital, the site component of the digital plan, and therefore we increased our digital spend by 85%. And finally, we saw a big opportunity in online video with 22% more time spent with online video. So we actually upped our efforts in YouTube, not just in terms of media spend, but also the content that we actually created. So what's been great about this tool is as we've started to get more comfortable using it, is it's not just informing our media plan, it's actually now starting to inform the content that we create as well. And ultimately, in terms of results, we were able to see a lot of success. We were able to see that we had higher campaign awareness when you looked at the whole plan versus just TV and just digital against the modern affluent versus general population. So we were seeing some significant increases there. We also saw some significant increases in terms of branded recall for the modern affluent of our campaign message versus the general population recall. And we were finally able to see from previous campaigns, we actually haven't got this result yet from this campaign, that from a marketing return on investment point of view, Project After is definitely driving significantly greater responsiveness from the targets that we're segmenting through being more efficient in terms of not just the media channels that we're using, but importantly the messages that we're using as well. So overall, we feel that we're in a place where we are much better informed than we were probably 3 years ago. It's a tool that continues to evolve. We've actually just released the latest version of it with a whole load of new data in there. So it just gets richer all the time as we start to build it. And it's proving to be an invaluable tool for us as we plan all of our campaigns going forward. Thanks very much.
Since I didn't hear anyone ooh and I just want to reiterate what Alex just said. Visa has created a DMP internal to their organization where they're tying not just attribution but customer usage together. I mean, that's pretty amazing, and I don't know how many other brands we're going to hear that from, but it really struck me as truly, truly remarkable. And I lost my seatmate.
I know, sorry.
Yeah, that's cool stuff. Thanks for sharing that, Alex. I think that's great. Liz and I are going to talk a little bit about using local as a way to target your customer. It's a very different take on the subject, but I think it's an interesting one. So first I want to set the stage a little bit here. Why is local important for your brand? We're here at AdTech. We're all very caught up in the technology and the digital side of this. This is from Forrester through 2016. Pure online still only represents about 10% of U.S. retail. So let's not forget how important the offline media is. And in particular, you can see the biggest growth here is in online to offline, or robo, research online, buy offline. Your consumers are buying your products locally. That's why it is so critical that you reach them effectively at that local level where they're closest to their purchase decision. And when we talk about local, mobile obviously plays a huge role in this. 20% of search is mobile, 50% of mobile search is local, which is 20% on compares to 20% on the desktop. And I just find this chart fascinating. This is mobile searches starting in 2007 when the iPhone came out, up to 2011, where now we've got the new iPads and the Droids. Mobile searches have grown 5x in the past 2 years. Phones are driving your consumers to your retail outlets, or your retail outlets or your partners, to purchase your products. That's why you have to be there.
So the other thing we wanted to understand was how are senior marketers, and I think for a lot of you in this room, these are probably the folks that you're having to go in and fight for a lot of dollars to fund your program. So how is the CMO, how is that senior brand owner really looking at local? And we wanted to be able to benchmark how effectively they were not only just using local strategy, but more importantly, almost how they were using technology. Because for those of you who kind of grew up in maybe a Marcom space or a decidedly non-digital space, we all remember what it was like being asked to go find all of the local advertising for our brand, and it is a largely manual process. So we wanted to understand and identify the required channels, what were the measurements, what were the tools and technologies that senior brand owners were actually using to be able to activate this segment. Because it really is a segment of your marketing dollars and your marketing strategy. So we actually surveyed about 296, close to 300 senior corporate marketing leaders through the CMO Council, and we did interviews with about 16 brand owners and about, I want to say about 10 academics and analysts in the space, and this research is actually fairly new. So it was conducted through November through February of 2013. So I'm going to share kind of the first big, I would say, aha that we kind of saw. And when we asked how important is localized marketing to demand generation and revenue, so how important is local to your bottom line, 59% said it was actually essential to their bottom line growth. Here's where it gets a little less exciting. Only 7% of brands felt that they had a highly evolved campaign and measurements in place that were able to actually activate customers at the local level. So clearly something's going wrong. There is something that is a disconnect between the national home office's desire to activate local consumers, understanding what all those trends are, and actually being able to do it. So we wanted to identify a couple brands that were actually doing it quite well and how they got there, because isn't it really irritating when people bring you really interesting research data points and they don't tell you how to correct it? So now we're going to show you the next step.
We're ham and egging this a little
Exactly.
bit. Yeah, I like it. No, so here's a case study from a client that we work with, national insurance brand. They've got 70,000 local agents, captive and non-captive. That means some of them sell only this brand, some of them sell multiple brands. Very, very recognizable. But they're relying on these 70,000 local agents to drive demand at the local level. And frankly, these guys are insurance agents. They're not marketers, and they're not very good at it. And in particular, they're not digital marketers. And they have a lot of regulatory constraints. As you can imagine, in the insurance industry, you have to be very careful about what you say where. So what did they do? They went out and this is actually, they auto-published local websites for their top 3,000 agents. A lot of times we don't think about a website from a media channel perspective, but your consumers absolutely do. They look at that as a media vehicle. So they went out and auto-published these websites, taking the data that they have, and which is actually now 10,000 agents. They've continued to do this because of the results that they're seeing. They have data on every one of these local agents. They combine that with the local data that they know about the individual location that they're in with a templated website and generate these sites. They also rolled out an ad builder solution to ensure that these guys could create local marketing ads as well as sales collateral that was on brand and met their regulatory efforts. What did they see? In the first 6 months, they saw these local agent sites drive 60,000 online visits. These are incremental visits, incremental consumers interacting with their brand. They were looking for an agent in their local business. And conversion rate to lead was 27%, which is ridiculous for those of us in this industry at all. Their ad builder solution is going to save them over $1 million in 2013. We were talking at the table today. It's crazy what you see at the local level, people out photocopying crazy stuff and just destroying the brand. This national insurance brand now knows that their brand is solid at the local level. The agents love it. Interestingly, 27% of the traffic into these sites is mobile. So again, mobile is critical when you're dealing with the local level. This is an example of a brand who said, hey, we do think this local is really important to us, and we haven't been doing it well. They went out and executed this and saw significant results.
So the second question that I'm going to share with you that we asked was, what were the challenges that your team is experiencing in actually making these local campaigns and keeping them refreshed? I think that anyone who has been trying to translate a national message to a local campaign, you're finding a really big gap in the execution from one to the other, and you're having to make the decision of, do we stick and focus our attention on the national campaign, or do we actually begin to localize that for these individual local markets? 57% of the marketers that we surveyed said that the reason, one of their biggest challenges is actually they lack the resources and the bandwidth to stay on top of constant content needs. And let me reiterate something here. The reason why more than half of the marketers we surveyed say this is because it's still a manual process. It is as if this is the land that technology forgot. So they are going in there and doing this and photocopying banner ads and taking them to their agency. These were real stories we were getting from some of these marketers. And what we have found is that it's not just limited resources. They also have a lack of budget. They lack the human manpower to go and call all their local papers, call all the local websites. And yes, they were calling local websites to find out if the banner ran. And they didn't know how. They didn't know where to start. So, as bringing another example.
All right, so here's a case study. So local marketing is really important, but nobody can do it because they don't have the resources. They don't have the money, the know-how, the time. Here's an example from a national floral brand. So these guys have thousands of local florists across the country. They're all different names, but they're associated with this national brand. They have e-commerce templated local sites, and they've traditionally been very media heavy. In fact, they brought this program in because they were previously running a newspaper FSI effort for these guys. You get the insert in your paper, and it's got 30 florist names on the back. That's what this program was designed to replace. They rolled out a templated PPC campaign. So they're getting the local florist to pay for it. They're spending the budget. They integrated call tracking. They did auto claiming on G+, Yahoo, and Bing. Average budget was only $200 a month for their local florist, right? The national organization is managing the technology to bring these local florists into the digital age and is running it for them. So what did they see? Within 6 months, 50% of their florists had signed up. Click-through rate, 8% higher than their PPC campaigns, and conversion rate to sale was over 10%. Conversions, this is fascinating actually, and should be really eye-opening for anybody who works in this space. When you're dealing with local, it's all about the phone. These are e-commerce sites. These people can buy their flowers from their local florist online. 70% of them were choosing to pick up the phone and make a phone call. If you're executing local marketing, ensure you're bringing the phone into play. Average ROI is over 300%. So the corporation, they saw $250K a month in incremental PPC budget driving local sales of their product. They're getting almost $3 million a year in incremental online budget being paid by their local florist. The local store is getting this professional paid search management at a fraction of the cost with clearly demonstrable ROI. Your local florist is not going to be able to execute effective PPC without technology, without the national brand supporting them, and that's what this program brought to them. And the consumer wins. They wanted to buy from a local florist anyway, and you gave them the opportunity to do that. And so really it's across the entire network that works.
So we knew that you guys really hadn't seen much in the past 30 minutes, and there are no slides, and no one's taking pictures of anything. So we wanted to inundate you with some more data points, because that's just a fun way to end our time together. So here are a couple more data points that we got from our study. 25% of brands believe that they can control their local brand assets. I fully expect all of you in the digital world to chuckle over this data point, okay? 94% of brands use primarily manual methods to do it. So again, we believe we can control our brand by making the intern go out and find it in the newspaper. That's how that translates. 31% of brands say that they delay in excess of 30 days to launch a local campaign. So think back to the data points that Shane presented at the very beginning of this, stating how much revenue is being driven through local, and then imagine waiting for 30 days to go get it. Then 6% of brands actually measure local effectiveness by local revenue. But the problem being, most of the brands, the reason why they don't do that is because they don't have access to any of that insight or information, because quite frankly, again, intern, newspaper, we're getting the whole connection here. 65% of brands lack confidence in their ability to develop a national and a local media campaign, or quite frankly, a cost-benefit analysis to go get the budget. Again, they don't have any insight. They don't have a single platform. They don't have a way to see any of this. And 7% of brands are satisfied with their local working relationship with their partner network. So imagine all those florists. Only 7% of those national brands are happy with all of those florists, with all of those insurance networks. But the biggest thing that we saw was that 30% of brands intend to invest in local marketing automation technology in order to fix these issues. So hopefully the message that we're sharing with you today is that technology soon will be rearing its ugly head in the localized space, and we think this is a huge leap forward. This study is available for folks, so this is not something that we are trying to hide from anyone. So please feel free to go either to Ballyhoo's website or to my website at cmocouncil.org and look for the big orange dot to be able to download the study, and we're happy to answer any questions about it.
You guys actually come onto the...
There's water hidden under the podium. Sorry.
I'm going to turn my mic. I know. Can you come in? Oh, yeah, thanks. So we're going to start with some Q&A. It's interesting to hear about how many, as we sit at AdTech, and we all, I think, or many of us believe that technology is obviously the center of our world and certainly the center of our marketing, from attribution to customer data modeling. To hear how many people are actually not using technology is pretty amazing. So to start with that, I think to lean out of that campaign or that presentation, should everyone do mobile? Should everyone be doing local marketing? What brands should not be doing it? And start with you, Liz, and then maybe Joy.
I suddenly feel like a really bad lounge act taking this.
Sorry, we don't have enough mics.
Okay, so Here's what I will say. Do I think that every brand should be doing local? Do I think every brand should be doing mobile or social? Not necessarily. I think every brand should be thinking mobile. I think every brand should be thinking social, whether you're on the B2B side of the fence or you're on the B2C side of the fence. At the end of the day, no matter who your customer is, this is how they are choosing to engage with you. We do not live in B2B or B2C silos anymore as marketers. We live in a C2B world. So if we don't think at that highly local segmentation level, we are going to miss our consumer, no matter who they are. If those of you who are here with vendors, how many of you guys are here with B2B brands? How many of you consider yourself a B2C marketer? Okay. How many of you control when and where and through what platform your consumer engages with you? Yeah, none of your hands went up, right? Because at the end of the day, today's consumer is controlling when they start that engagement, right? They can do it by their mobile phone in the middle of the night. We're all C2B. So I think we have to think as if we are all mobile, local, hyper-social marketers and be able to walk back from there. Because if we don't start thinking like that, we're going to be left behind.
Just to add to that, can everybody hear me? Yeah. So mobile, I think, and based on like the work that we've done, we work, Symphony IRI works with a lot of CPG companies, and we work with a lot of B2C companies. And what we've seen is that there are categories where mobile works, and so those categories tend to be more of an immediate consumption. So beverages, for instance, or if you're at a particular, if you're in store and you want to do a quick comparison, so you don't know between product A and B, you're in the aisle and there's a number of choices in front of you. You'll pull out your phone, go to Google or go to wherever you go, and then get a review and a comparison and make your purchase decision. So there are categories where probably I would also, and this is probably a venture, but I would say it's lower involvement categories where you do more on-the-spur mobile searches, and it's a premise. But if you're going to buy a car and you're not going to pull out your phone and do a car comparison on your mobile phone, whereas if you're, like I said, if you're going to go get some kind of a conditioner and you're looking at or hair care product or skincare product, personal care, and you see two products that have different ingredients and you want to do a quick comparison, maybe those type of categories are probably where mobile has a greater impact. So that's a premise. I can say that we've modeled car data and looked at mobile advertising for cars, and that people are not actually using. People might be doing a quick comparison between a Beamer and a Mercedes online on their mobile phone.
Yeah, I mean, I particularly on the mobile piece, I would say you have to be thinking mobile nowadays. I mean, I think it's just a huge omission if it's not part of your thought process, and it should really be getting on the plan, because I think it's still very nascent in terms as a marketing tool, but certainly in terms of a device through which we consume content, it's very mature. And I think the only way we're going to learn as marketers how best to use the mobile opportunity is to be in that space and to test and learn our way to a model that works for our particular brands and our particular business. So I'm a big advocate of being in the mobile space. Local, I would say definitely as well. I mean, it's a little different for our business because of the way we're structured. But I think what's interesting is as we start to get more granular information into our segmentation and we start to think about where in the US, for example, you're getting larger clusters of particular segments, then it starts to become something that we could actually apply in our marketing as we go forward and we plan our marketing plans. And that's something that we definitely have in our sort of vision of where this tool can go in the future. So, yeah, I'm a big believer in both.
Yeah, I think from our point of view as proactive, we see mobile as a huge part of what we do. Obviously, television advertising is where our brand is largely reached out from, although we have a huge digital footprint as well. And mobile has become 8% of our overall company sales. So, but what's different is obviously local advertising, and we haven't figured out how to quite put those two together yet. And certainly the research factor, I think, on mobile has been higher for us because of our history as an inbound telemarketing company as well. And so customers know that they could hit that click-to-call button and they'll find someone on the other end that they could talk to. And it feels like when I talk to other marketers, it's a big piece of what they're missing is how to tie that telecom piece into mobile. So audience questions before I blather on uncontrollably? A lot of people here. Someone has to have a question.
With a mobile phone. Wait a minute, I like that one.
Nice work.
I was just wondering if you consider SEO to be more important to mobile than PPC. Like
SEO? I can answer that. No. Because pull up any search results page on your mobile phone, and with the top 3 listings being paid, it's primarily dominated by paid search. I think SEO is very important. There's no question about it. But I think that the engines by nature are diminishing the importance of SEO as they continue to push more and more advertising onto a smaller screen.
I mean, like, for instance, if you just like do a maps listing or some social media, like on Pinterest these days, it seems like if you get a listing in like SEO, it's kind of bound to. I mean, I was just interested, like, if you guys get clicked calls like through social media and map listings just as much as you would like on keyword search, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, we see a ton of activity from there. I think that what's interesting about the local space today, that kind of local mobile space today, is, and I don't mean to diminish it, but it's not that hard to win there right now, right? I mean, these local guys, they're not many of them that are particularly good at this, right? So as a national brand, if you have thousands of stores and you can go out and execute some basic SEO with locally relevant sites and claim their listings on G+, and buff out that G+ page a little bit, it's not that hard to win locally right now. It's such an opportunity for brands at this point to go use those local assets. And like anything, I think you can't win with a single tactic. You have to go into it with a comprehensive view of paid and earned media.
I think with mobile, more than any other medium, the form is informing the function. And I think as marketers, we're really struggling with that, right? Google's changing the rules, as you mentioned, with putting the paid listings on top, what's going to happen with Pinterest. But in today's evolving world, and as these guys all demonstrated, the consumer pathway is changing, but the very rules of media are changing as well to match these advertising formats.
Hi, this question is actually for the Campbell Soup and the Symphony IRI team. So one of the things that I'm wondering about is how do you connect the online world to the in-store world? Because a lot of money is spent online, but then a lot of the purchasing happens in-store, and then there are lots of data challenges, I guess, in mapping and making sure that the in-store data is mapped accurately to the online data. So how are you getting around that?
Yeah, so I guess I'll kind of throw my take on there, and I'll let Joy talk. I mean, to say it short, I mean, we haven't been able to do it yet, and that's part of the reason why we're here today is because it's such a, like Joy had mentioned, there's a path to purchase that exists within this kind of CPG realm, and if you're not connecting the online to the offline is tough because you can't say, okay, well, there was an online ad and it drove the person to the website and then they bought it right there. I mean, you have to look at how they interact with each other. So if I have an online ad, does it drive someone to my own website? And then that's what ends up driving them to the store. The other thing that we had mentioned that Joy had said was if they see an online ad and they go to the store and it happens that the product was on deal there, and maybe that's what drove them to purchase. So it's such a complex environment that there hasn't been a real focus on measuring it, probably because of how difficult it is. But as you said, the spend is increasing, the presence is increasing. So if we're going to really understand what it's driving in terms of what people actually go and spend their dollars on, I mean, this is critical for us.
Just a quick add to that, the data challenge is really the challenge. So, and especially for CPG, the problem is the funnel is opaque. So you throw stuff in the top, you get people, target them with media, and then you execute online advertising, you invest in search advertising, and you're not sure what those consumers are. And the challenge for CPG companies is increasingly going to be identifying those consumers. So there's developments taking place in the industry. There's big data. I'm not going to, that's a cliche, but there's loyalty card data, there's increasingly retailers are making that available for analysis. So there's ways of mapping those consumers. For this analysis, we are leveraging set-top box data, 8 million base of households and their TV viewing behavior. And we are working at very painstakingly, it's taking a long time, but we are matching them to their consumption behavior. And that's the match that needs to be done in order to identify how everything's coming together. That wasn't possible in the past.
So I think the question begs to be asked, for me at least, where does attribution fall into all of this? And is attribution done on the creative level, or is attribution done on the media level for all of these problems that we're discussing today?
So attribution is essentially about the conversion, right? So you're trying to attribute each conversion back to everything. The problem is each of us views one side of the pyramid. We talked about this earlier at the table. Media will try to kind of divvy up between offline and online media, but there's a whole bunch of other activities that also influences conversion. And like for example, in-store promotions, there's like billions of dollars being spent on that, and there's that attribution, that piece is completely left out of attribution today. And so ultimately you need to realize that conversion is not just like a one-off event. Conversion was not driven just by what you did in the last 3 months with your media campaign. There's in-store and there's brand equity. There's companies like Coke need to work less harder on their advertising because they have a large history that they can leverage.
I don't think they're working less harder. And I think that the folks at Coke would probably argue with that as well. I think that the team over there and their CMO is very committed to melding that brand value with their digital. And I think that they've done something there very similar to what I think is the critical part about the Visa story, which is they took a step back and stopped trying to measure everything and stopped trying to make sense out of every piece of data that for some reason we are collecting in this like data decathlon we've all decided that we're competing in. No one gets a medal. Like, I hate to burst everyone's bubble. There's no winner at the end of this race. So I think that what's fascinating about what you guys have done has really stepped back and identified what the key strategy is and what the goal is, and that everyone then marches behind that banner. And I think that's really, at the end of the day, what you guys at Campbell are beginning to do.
Yeah, and I would actually build on that and totally agree. I think what's great about the tool we have is the strategy has been absolutely informed by, an audience-first perspective. So we know the consumer, we know how they're consuming media, we know where we need to reach them. And therefore, we're able to build our measurement methodologies around where we started. And what you're able to do, the great thing about digital, is you're able to test different types of creative. So we can start to get a better idea of attribution between the data and where we've actually placed our message, and also the type of message and the type of creative. And what I think has been great about this tool is it's making our whole measurement much more informed than it ever was before as well. So we're really, we're starting to get a better sense of the attribution between the two. But I think, in summary, they will always work together. I mean, you can't divorce one from the other. Great placement with bad creative, it's not going to perform that well.
I know how to clear a room now. Talk about attribution. Wow. Not a pre-lunch topic. So we have time for two more, and then this gentleman, he's been patiently waiting.
Would you say that programmatic buying today it makes it more easy for you to target those audiences, get that data that you were speaking, or it makes it more easier to today to have this strategy, or it split the budget between mobile, SEO, or search engine marketing and everything?
I think you planted this.
Yeah, I did not.
You answer it.
I think I think programmatic media as it exists today is truly what direct response has always been. So I think for brand advertisers, I perceive it has changed the conversation a little bit, but from our world, I think it has just allowed us to bring forward a lot of the data that we already use and force our publishing partners to leverage it as well. But I don't know if you guys have a different thought on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think if I understand your question correctly, I mean, you need to look at it as a program as a whole. I think you can't buy things in a silo and in isolation of what you're doing in other parts of your media plan. And again, that's what I love about our tool, is it's forcing us as marketers to think in a programmatic way. And the way we structure our teams is in a totally integrated way. I mean, our teams, our marketers are expected to be everything from strategy to tactics, and across all the channels, whether it's TV or it's social media or anything in between, because nowadays that's how you need to think. That's how the consumer is thinking. And I think, if you artificially break that up, the whole may not add up well and work as efficiently and as effectively as it should. So, that's our point of view and how we're approaching it. But, you clearly need to have tools like the one that we've built to ensure that your marketers have the information to hand and are as informed as they need to be to make those tough strategic choices and trade-offs that they're going to have to make. Because, with the many, many channels that there are out there nowadays, you inevitably are going to have to leave the majority of them probably on the table. And that's a tough choice to make.
Last question. We have 8 seconds.
Thanks for taking my question here. My question's mostly to Campbell Soup and Visa here. Just follow up on the attribution. Hate to beat that horse again. Do you feel the industry is moving to a different way of attributing conversion or KPI? Because it seems like everybody in the world right now is on last click attribution. As you invest more and more in social, in awareness, it seems like there's a need to start moving to multi-touch attribution. Is that the way thinking at this point? Or if that's the case, how would that impact social media marketing? And also number 2, any comments on Facebook relating your experience with them, what you like and what you don't like about it? Thank you.
It's a great question. I think you're right. I mean, as consumers, the way that we are engaging with content in different channels has evolved dramatically, and I don't think it can be just the last click attribution, because a lot of times as consumers we don't click anymore. The way that we are engaging and consuming content, whether it's a marketing message or another form of content, often doesn't involve a click. And I think, we have this conversation and debate internally, how do we actually get a better understanding of that? How do we really start to understand the types of engagement with content that are truly going to be impactful and important in achieving our business and brand objectives? And I think, as again we say internally, it begs for new methodology. I think, we've tried existing methodology to try to get to that level of insight and understanding, and it doesn't quite get to where we need it to be. And I think, that's where a client, we need to work with research agencies, with the platform owners, and really start to sort of map our data together to truly start to get to some of those answers that we have questions for. So, that I hope help. And in terms of Facebook, we've done a lot on Facebook. We found it to be very, very successful for us, not just in terms of performance media, but I'd say also in terms of brand building. I think, you can meaningfully engage a consumer on the Facebook platform. And it continues to be somewhere that we see absolutely a positive reason for being there, and we see it as an advantage in our plan.
I think I would probably echo a lot of the comments that you just heard from the standpoint that it's understanding how the dynamics have changed. And I think traditionally what we've always tried to do is if you do A, then B happens. And that's really not the case anymore. You may do A, which makes someone go do 1, and then they go do 2, and then eventually they may come around and do C, and you never really understood that ecosystem was in play. And that's the term that we use a lot is the marketing ecosystem. There's the concept of paid, owned, and earned, and we focused a lot on the paid and not so much on the owned and earned. So just having that kind of paradigm shift within the organization, which again is just very recent for us. That was a big part of realizing that this is something important that we need to be paying attention to, and it's not just your clicks and it's not just the impressions. That was a lot of the times our KPIs were actually those kind of those measurement metrics where that's not really what you're trying to do. You don't have an online campaign because you want someone to click or you want someone to see it. So we've kind of put the cart before the horse where that's what we were measuring against, and since you're buying against that, it's really easy to meet your objective. So again, that's what we think that the real benefit to what Joy and IRI is doing is understanding the interaction and how one media vehicle can drive you to another. Similar with Facebook, we're kind of new. I think we've seen it's a great way to engage deeper, but the main thing is the content has to be right. It's not just, I think one of the things about our portfolio is you have the cooking behavior is a big thing that we try to focus on, and we have the Campbell's Kitchen property, which helps to answer that question that everyone has every day: what am I going to make for dinner? And Facebook's been a good place to kind of put some of those messages, and that's where, with our entire portfolio, that's where you've seen most of our online engagement is with our cooking business and the products that you use for cooking. So again, I think we're getting into it more now from all of our brands standpoint, but again, it's probably it's the best place for deeper engagement is what we're finding.
Well, we're super over, so thank you guys for this great content, and I appreciate it.
One more bottle.